the darkest battles of World War II that changed history forever. War is often remembered through victories, maps filled with arrows, borders shifting, commanders making decisions that seem calculated, almost inevitable. It gives the illusion of control, of direction, of purpose. But there were moments in World War II where none of that existed. Moments where the battle stopped making sense, where soldiers no longer knew what they were fighting for, only that they had to keep moving, keep surviving, keep breathing through something that had already gone too far. These were not the battles that made headlines. They were not always the turning points taught in textbooks or remembered in speeches. They were something darker, something quieter, something that unfolded in places where history itself seemed to hesitate. Because in these moments, war changed. It stopped being a clash of armies and became something far more personal. Fear replaced strategy, instinct replaced command, and survival became the only objective that mattered. You are about to step into those moments, not to watch them from a distance, but to feel them as they unfolded. To stand where decisions were made too late, where hope arrived too slowly, and where entire units disappeared into silence. And once you see what happened in these battles, you may never look at war the same way again. The silence after the first shot. The gunfire has already stopped. No explosions, no movement, no voices shouting orders across the chaos. Just silence. A heavy, unnatural silence that settles over the battlefield like something alive. You are standing in the aftermath. The ground is torn apart, soaked, uneven. Equipment lies scattered where it was dropped, some of it still intact, some of it shattered beyond recognition. And then there are the spaces where people should be, but are not. Because the first thing you notice is not what remains. It is what is missing. Entire units reduced to absence. Positions that were once held now empty, as if the battle simply erased everything that stood there. No clear line of engagement, no visible outcome, only fragments that suggest something violent passed through and then vanished. This is where the story begins. Not with the charge, not with the command, but with what comes after. The moment when the noise fades and reality settles in, when soldiers look around and realize that whatever plan existed before no longer matters. Because silence on a battlefield is never peaceful. It is a signal, a warning that something has gone wrong in a way that cannot be undone. And as you stand there, surrounded by what is left, a question begins to form. What kind of battle leaves nothing behind but silence? When war lost its purpose. There comes a moment in war when the objective disappears, not because it was achieved, not because it was abandoned, but because no one can clearly explain it anymore. You are no longer advancing toward a goal. You are no longer defending a position that matters. You are simply there, inside a system that continues to move forward even after its purpose has been lost. This is where some of the darkest battles of World War II truly began. Orders still arrived, but they felt disconnected from reality. Commands were given based on maps that no longer reflected what was happening on the ground. Positions that were supposed to exist had already collapsed. Units that were expected to respond had already been reduced to silence. And yet, the battle continued. Soldiers moved forward without knowing why. They held ground that could not be held. They pushed into areas that had no strategic value, only danger. Every step forward felt less like progress and more like repetition, as if the war itself had become automatic. This is the point where something shifts inside the human mind. Because when there is no clear objective, fear begins to take its place. Not the sharp fear of immediate danger, but a deeper, more unsettling realization that nothing about what is happening is leading anywhere. You are not fighting to win. You are fighting because stopping is not an option. And that creates a different kind of battlefield. One where decisions lose meaning, where sacrifice is no longer tied to outcome, and where survival becomes detached from purpose. The line between action and confusion begins to blur, and the structure that once held everything together starts to dissolve. This is where war becomes something else entirely. Not a strategy, not a mission, but a condition you cannot escape. And once that shift happens, the next question becomes unavoidable. If the purpose is gone, then what is really driving the battle forward? The command that could not be undone. It always begins with a decision. A moment inside a command room, far from the front lines. Maps spread across a table, voices measured, controlled, confident. Lines are drawn, movements planned, outcomes anticipated. Everything appears rational, until it isn't. Because in war, a single order does not remain on paper. It travels. It moves through radios, through messengers, through chains of command, until it reaches men who will carry it out without seeing the full picture. And once it reaches them, it cannot be taken back. There were moments in World War II where decisions made in minutes sealed the fate of thousands. Not because they were reckless, but because they were made under pressure with incomplete information in a situation that was already slipping out of control. An advance ordered too late. A retreat denied when it was still possible. A position held longer than it should have been. At first, nothing seems wrong. The units move. The orders are followed. The structure holds. Then reality begins to interfere. The enemy is not where they were expected to be. The terrain does not allow the movement that was planned. Communication delays stretch minutes into hours, hours into irreversible consequences. And suddenly, the decision that once felt controlled becomes a chain reaction. Soldiers advance into positions they cannot hold. Reinforcements arrive too late. Escape routes close without warning. What was meant to be a maneuver becomes a trap, but the order still stands. Because by the time the truth reaches the command, it is already too late to change anything. The distance between decision and consequence has become too great. And this is where the weight of command reveals itself. Not in the moment the order is given, but in the moment it cannot be undone. Because war does not forgive hesitation, and it does not allow corrections once events have already begun to unfold. So the question is not whether the decision was right or wrong. It is how many lives were already set on a path that could no longer be altered. And once that path is taken, the next reality emerges. What happens when those who must follow orders begin to realize that the orders no longer match the world around them? Trapped between orders and reality. There is a moment when obedience becomes a burden. Not because the soldier refuses to follow orders, but because the world around him no longer reflects the order he was given. You are told to advance, but there is no clear path forward. The terrain is broken, visibility is limited, and the enemy is no longer where intelligence said they would be. Every step feels uncertain, every movement disconnected from the plan that was supposed to guide you. And yet, the order remains. This is the fracture point, where command and reality begin to drift apart. In many of the darkest moments of World War II, soldiers found themselves caught in this space. The chain of command still existed, but the conditions on the ground had changed so drastically that following orders no longer guaranteed survival. To disobey meant risking punishment, dishonor, or worse. To obey meant walking into something that no longer made sense. Imagine holding a position you know cannot be defended. Watching your surroundings collapse while the command insists that you remain. Hearing distant artillery, seeing movement where there should be none, feeling the structure around you slowly unravel, and still being told to hold. This is where war becomes internal. Not just a fight against an external enemy, but a conflict between instinct and discipline, between what you are told to do and what you know is happening. Some followed orders to the end, others hesitated. And in that hesitation, a new kind of danger emerges, because war does not pause for doubt. Every second spent questioning is a second where conditions continue to change, where opportunities close, where survival becomes more uncertain. And once that tension reaches its limit, something inevitable begins to happen. Coordination breaks, not all at once, not with a single event, but gradually, as communication falters and structure dissolves. And when that happens, the battlefield transforms into something far more dangerous, a place where no one knows what is happening anymore. The collapse of coordination. War depends on connection. Orders moving from command to unit, signals traveling across distances, timing aligning movements that must happen together or not at all. It is this invisible network that holds everything in place, and when it breaks, everything follows. At first, the disruption is subtle, a delayed message, a radio signal that cuts out for a few seconds longer than expected, a unit that does not respond when called. Small gaps that can be explained, ignored, worked around. But then the gaps widen. Communication begins to fail in ways that cannot be corrected. Radios fall silent. Messengers never arrive. Entire units move based on outdated information, unaware that the situation around them has already changed. And suddenly, the battlefield is no longer unified. It fragments. During critical moments of World War II, this collapse of coordination turned structured operations into isolated struggles. Units that were meant to support each other fought alone. Reinforcements moved toward positions that no longer existed. Defensive lines dissolved because no one knew where the line actually was. Imagine advancing, believing that Allied forces are moving alongside you, only to realize they never received the order, or holding a position, expecting relief, while the command assumes you have already withdrawn. This is how confusion spreads, not through chaos alone, but through the absence of clarity. And in that absence, something dangerous takes hold. Each unit begins to operate based on its own perception of reality. Decisions are made in isolation. Movements become unpredictable. What was once a coordinated effort becomes a collection of disconnected actions. The battlefield loses its structure. And when structure disappears, so does control. Because without coordination, there is no strategy. There is no shared objective. There is only reaction. And reaction is slower, more fragile, more vulnerable to everything that comes next. Which raises a new and unsettling question. If the battle is no longer guided by command, then what is guiding it now? Where geography became a weapon. There are places on Earth that do not simply host battles. They shape them. You are no longer fighting only an enemy. You are fighting the ground beneath your feet, the air around you, the conditions that do not care who you are or what side you stand on. And in some of the darkest moments of World War II, geography did more than influence the outcome. It decided it. Imagine moving through a forest so dense that visibility disappears after a few steps. Every sound becomes uncertain. Every shadow feels like a threat. You cannot see the enemy, but you know they are there, waiting, watching, closer than you think, or standing in a city reduced to rubble where every street becomes a trap. Buildings no longer provide shelter, only concealment for something you cannot predict. Movement slows. Progress becomes dangerous. Every corner could be the last. Then there is the cold. Not discomfort, not inconvenience, but a force that seeps into your body and takes control. Weapons freeze. Hands lose sensation. Time stretches as survival becomes a battle against the environment itself. In these places, strategy begins to lose its power. Plans that looked precise on a map collapse when faced with terrain that cannot be controlled. Movement becomes slower than expected. Supply lines struggle, visibility disappears, and the enemy, familiar with the same conditions, adapts faster. The battlefield stops being neutral. It turns against you. And this changes everything. Because when geography becomes a weapon, it does not discriminate. It does not follow orders. It does not pause or adjust. It simply exists, shaping every decision, every movement, every chance of survival. And in that environment, something else begins to take hold. Not just physical struggle, but something deeper. Because when the world around you becomes hostile, the battle does not stay outside. It moves inward. And that is where the next fight begins. The enemy you could not see. There is a point in war where the most dangerous enemy is no longer in front of you, it is inside you. You are still holding your position. Your weapon is still in your hands. The battle has not ended, but something has changed in a way that no map, no command, no strategy can account for. Your body is still present. Your mind is beginning to drift. Exhaustion sets in first. Not the kind that can be solved with rest, but a deeper fatigue that builds over days without sleep, without pause, without relief. Your reactions slow. Your thoughts blur. Time begins to feel uneven. Then comes hunger. Not just the absence of food, but the constant awareness that your strength is fading, that every movement costs more than it should, that survival is becoming a calculation you cannot win for long. And then, fear. Not the sharp, immediate fear of incoming fire, but something quieter, more persistent. The kind that settles into your thoughts and stays there. The realization that the situation is not improving, that there is no clear way out, that the battle may continue long after your ability to endure it is gone. In many of the darkest moments of World War II, this invisible enemy became the most decisive factor. Soldiers began to hesitate, not because they lacked courage, but because their minds were no longer aligned with the reality around them. Decisions slowed, reactions faltered. The line between awareness and confusion began to blur. And this is where the battlefield changes again. Because when the enemy you cannot see begins to take control, the fight is no longer about territory. It is about maintaining yourself. Every thought becomes a struggle. Every choice feels heavier. The simplest actions require effort that no one outside that moment can fully understand. And once that internal battle begins to take over, something inevitable follows. Hope begins to shift, not disappear completely, but transform into something fragile, something dependent on a single expectation. That help is coming. That someone, somewhere, still knows where you are. But what happens when that expectation is all you have left, and it begins to fade? The illusion of reinforcements. There is a moment when hope becomes the only thing holding everything together. You are told that reinforcements are coming, that support is on the way, that this position, this situation, this unbearable stretch of time is temporary. And for a while, you believe it. You hold your ground. You endure longer than you thought possible. You push through exhaustion, through fear, through everything that tells you to stop, because there is a promise that this will end soon, that someone is coming. In many of the darkest moments of World War II, that promise was the last thread keeping entire units from collapsing. But time begins to pass. Minutes turn into hours. Hours stretch into something harder to measure. The sounds you expect to hear never arrive. No engines, no distant movement, no sign that anyone is approaching. And slowly, something begins to change. At first, it is doubt, then realization. Reinforcements are not coming. The line you are holding is not part of a larger plan anymore. The support you were counting on has been delayed, redirected, or lost entirely. And the worst part is not the absence itself. It is the moment you understand it. Because that is when the illusion breaks. And when it does, everything that depended on it begins to collapse with it. The energy you were using to endure begins to drain. Decisions become heavier, movements slower. The idea of holding the position starts to feel impossible, not because the enemy has changed, but because the expectation that sustained you is gone. You are no longer waiting. You are alone. And that realization transforms the battlefield into something far more dangerous than any external threat. Because once hope disappears, what remains is not just fear. It is clarity. The kind that forces you to see the situation exactly as it is. And in that clarity, a new question begins to emerge. If no one is coming, then what happens to those who were left behind? The battle that erased itself. There are battles that history remembers, and then there are battles that disappear, not because they were small, not because they lacked importance, but because they did not fit the narrative that came after. They left no clear victory, no defining moment, no outcome that could be easily explained, so they were buried. In the shadows of World War II, entire confrontations unfolded with devastating intensity, only to be overshadowed by larger operations, more decisive victories, more recognizable names. But for those who were there, nothing about these battles was small. Imagine fighting in a place where no one will come to document what happens, where the scale of loss is never fully recorded, where units vanish from reports, not because they did not exist, but because their story was never fully told. These were battles without witnesses. Or worse, battles with witnesses who never returned. What makes these moments so unsettling is not just the destruction, but the absence of memory. The idea that something so intense, so violent, so defining for those involved could fade into obscurity, leaving behind only fragments scattered across forgotten records. No recognition, no acknowledgement, only silence. And in that silence, something powerful is lost. Because history, as it is often told, creates the illusion that everything important has been accounted for, that every major event has been studied, understood, placed into context. But these battles challenge that idea. They remind us that not everything is recorded. Not everything is remembered. And some of the most significant human experiences can exist without ever becoming part of the story we tell about the past, which leads to a deeper realization. If entire battles can disappear from history, then how many lives, how many decisions, how many moments that changed everything were never seen, never understood, never acknowledged? And once you begin to consider that, the weight of what was lost extends far beyond the battlefield. The weight of civilian shadows. There is a part of war that does not wear a uniform. It does not carry a weapon. It does not receive orders. And yet, it stands in the middle of everything that unfolds. The civilians. In the darkest moments of World War II, the line between battlefield and home did not just blur. It disappeared. You are not a soldier. You did not choose this. And yet, the war arrives at your door with the same force, the same unpredictability, the same consequences. Streets that once carried daily life now carry fear. Buildings that once meant safety now offer no protection. The sound of conflict becomes constant, and there is nowhere to go. In many of these hidden battles, civilians were not caught in the crossfire. They became part of it. Cities turned into battlegrounds. Entire communities found themselves trapped between advancing forces, unable to escape, unable to influence what was happening, forced to endure the same conditions as those fighting, but without the means to defend themselves. And this changes the nature of war. Because when civilians are no longer separate from the battlefield, every decision carries a different weight. Every movement, every delay, every miscalculation extends beyond military consequences. It reaches into lives that were never meant to be part of the conflict. Families are separated. Homes are lost. Survival becomes a daily uncertainty, shaped not by strategy, but by proximity to events no one can control. And yet, their stories often remain in the background, overshadowed by troop movements, by strategic outcomes, by the larger narrative of victory and defeat. But if you look closer, you begin to see something else, a shadow running alongside every battle, a silent presence that carries the true cost of what is happening. Because war is not only defined by those who fight, it is defined by those who are forced to live through it. And once you begin to understand that, the battlefield expands beyond anything you imagine. The moment control was lost. There is always a point where control slips, not gradually, not in a way that can be corrected, but suddenly, decisively, in a way that no one can reverse once it begins. Up until that moment, there is still structure. Orders are given. Units move with purpose. Command believes it understands the situation, even if the conditions are difficult. There is still a sense that the battle can be shaped, directed, contained. And then, something breaks. In the chaos of World War II, this moment came without warning. A misjudged position, a failed communication, an unexpected maneuver by the enemy, a single weakness that expands faster than anyone can respond. At first, it seems manageable, a delay, a gap, a temporary disruption. But the system begins to unravel. Orders arrive too late. Units move without coordination. Lines that were supposed to hold begin to collapse. And as each piece falls out of place, the ability to regain control becomes smaller, weaker, more distant. Then comes the realization. No one is directing the battle anymore. What was once organized becomes unpredictable. Movements are no longer planned, only reacted to. Decisions are made in isolation, without knowledge of what is happening elsewhere. And in that moment, something irreversible happens. The battle stops being controlled. It begins to control everyone inside it. Soldiers are no longer part of a strategy. They are caught inside a situation that is moving faster than their ability to understand it. The structure that once gave meaning to every action disappears, leaving only instinct, urgency, and survival. And this is where the danger reaches its highest point. Because without control, there is no limit, no clear direction, no defined outcome. Only a chain of events that continues to escalate, feeding on confusion, on fear, on the absence of anything stable, which leads to a question that cannot be ignored. If control is gone, then what remains to decide how the battle ends? What victory could not repair? There are battles that end, and then there are battles that continue long after the last shot is fired. On paper, victory is clear. One side advances, the other retreats. Positions are secured, objectives completed, reports written. The outcome is defined, recorded, accepted. But for those who were there, something does not end. In the aftermath of World War II, soldiers walked away from battlefields that had already taken more than any result could justify. The noise faded, the movement stopped, but the experience remained. Not as a memory that could be easily placed in the past, but as something that stayed present. You return from a battle that is considered a success, yet nothing feels restored. The faces you remember are no longer there. The places you stood have changed beyond recognition. The meaning of what happened does not align with the word victory, because some losses cannot be measured. They are not counted in numbers or reflected in reports. They exist in the silence that follows, in the moments when everything slows down and the reality of what happened begins to settle in. Sleep becomes difficult. Thoughts return without warning. The mind replays decisions, moments, outcomes that cannot be changed. And this is where the true cost reveals itself, not in the battle, but in what remains after it. Because victory, as it is often defined, suggests resolution, closure, an end. But in these battles, there is no clean ending, only continuation. A life that moves forward, carrying something that does not fade, something that reshapes how everything else is seen, understood, felt. And when enough individuals carry that weight, it becomes something larger, a collective memory that cannot be fully expressed, only experienced. Which leads to the final realization. If victory cannot repair what was broken, then what did these battles truly change? The battles that changed what war means. There is a version of war that exists in history books, structured, defined, measured in victories, losses, and outcomes that can be explained, categorized, understood. But that version is incomplete. Because the darkest battles of World War II did not just change borders or alter the balance of power. They changed what war means. They revealed that war is not always driven by purpose, that it can continue even after meaning is lost, that decisions made in moments can carry consequences far beyond anything those moments were meant to contain. They showed that control is fragile, that structure can collapse faster than anyone expects, that once chaos takes hold, it does not follow rules, it does not pause, and it does not offer second chances. But more than that, they changed the people who lived through them, not just physically, but in ways that could not be seen. They altered how fear is understood, how survival is defined, how silence can carry more weight than any sound. And that change did not stay on the battlefield. It followed them home, into their lives, into the way they saw the world, the way they spoke, the things they chose not to say. Because some experiences cannot be fully shared, only carried. And when enough of those experiences exist, they begin to reshape something larger than individual memory. They reshape history itself, not the version written in timelines and summaries, but the deeper understanding of what war truly is when everything else is stripped away. And that is the final truth these battles leave behind. War is not only about who wins or loses, it is about what remains. And sometimes, what remains is something that cannot be repaired, cannot be forgotten, and cannot be fully understood.